Mark Prisk, UK Business and Enterprise Minister. He's in the region to look to strengthen ties within China and Hong Kong and send a strong message that the UK is open for business. Now, I'm going to assume they are open for business. So how is your tour going out here in Asia so far?
It's very encouraging. And what I like is the fact that we're getting small and medium-sized businesses talking to us, both Chinese businesses looking to come to the UK, but also looking at how we can encourage more UK businesses to come to mainland China, but also come here to Hong Kong.
What type of businesses in terms of when we look at the industrial, earlier we just talked about trade tariffs and there's the complaining of protectionism that's creeping into place. But in terms of the areas that you think are most free to do business, which categories are you looking at?
I think there are very good opportunities, particularly for UK businesses. We have strengths, for example, in sustainable development, very strong in architecture, civil engineering, and I want to look at some of the opportunities right here in Hong Kong today. But also, we've been talking in the last week in Shanghai, looking at ITC, low energy design, some of our green technology that we're starting to develop and get a world-class expertise in the UK.
Well, you're certainly coming into this with a very different angle. Just a couple of months ago, we talked about austerity measures in Europe, budget cuts, which I'm sure will still be a focus. But in some sense, do you feel like we're past that stage and we're now focusing on growth once again, or we still have to worry about these measures?
Well, the UK is determined to tackle its deficit, and that means that investors can then have confidence that this is a stable and good place to come and invest in. But it's also about growth, and you're absolutely right. And, you know, we have a strong belief that actually we can help, for example, mainland China. The UK and mainland China are good potential partners for growth. And that's why this week I've been working with British businesses who are engaging with Chinese businesses so that actually we can learn and work from each other.
Let me ask you a more macro question.
Sure.
You know, we had the austerity measures, we had budget cuts, then we had stimulus put in around the world, then we had interest rate cuts as well. And so there's been a lot of things, and we also saved the banks. And that's another thing we also did. So there's a lot of things that the governments around the world have done to try to stimulate this economy. But the one thing that sticks out still, and I think it does to you as well, is why are we not seeing more positive numbers in terms of the jobs? And you had your jobs numbers out yesterday, which were a bit weaker than expected. But nonetheless, it's an ongoing trend that we're not creating enough jobs, at least for the working and middle class around the world.
I think one of the critical things is help small businesses start, and those ones we have grow. I think very often the media language, possibly with the exception of Bloomberg, I'm sure, the media language has tended to be about the negative issues, the reductions in spending and so on. But, you know, we've got some fantastic opportunities for growth, and that's why I'm encouraged that actually we're able to develop new relationships, new initiatives, new protocols. And I was able to see, for example, on Monday, a British business, small business, opening up its new operation in Shanghai, Sondrel. And that's the kind of initiative I want to encourage.
Talk about the environment a little bit in China, because
sure.
you mentioned that earlier, that would be one of the areas that you try to focus on. How much money is the government and how serious is the Chinese government in protecting the environment and putting additional funds in place to promote that industry?
Well, I've been very encouraged in my discussions with the Chinese government and party officials over this last week. They really understand that for sustainable long-term development, you need the capability of moving away from some of the old practices so that we capture carbon, we keep low carbon emissions, we actually look at how we can develop new technologies. And that's why I think they're keen to work with us. We've got some great expertise in that, but also so there's the built environment. You know, if you think of some of the design and civil engineering consultancies, we've been able to help here in Hong Kong and other major cities develop sustainable, lower carbon development. It's good for the long term.
I'm going to play devil's advocate on this, because you have all these new agendas to do, and of course that all requires funding from the banks. The UK banks are in a interesting situation, and we've heard that from different banks that the lending remains very tight. Is there some discussion as to loosening that lending ability to these small companies that are trying to get funding and trying to add jobs and trying to grow their business?
Yeah, we're actively involved with the banks. I mean, clearly, you know, where banks are seen or indeed are found to be acting unreasonably, we're going to make sure they understand this is really important to the UK economy and to UK small businesses. But government has a role here. We want to broaden the business angel community in the UK, strengthen private equity, and really make sure that there's, if you like, a sense that there's a choice for the business, so they don't just have 3 or 4 high street banks in the UK to lean on.
Now, there are skeptics out there that will say, you know, you're newly appointed, and there's a certain curve that's going to have to take place. What's the goal? A year from now, what are we talking about in terms of the accomplishment that you're looking to accomplish in terms of global trade?
Okay. I'm wary of setting grandiose targets. I'm a great believer, as someone who used to run his own business, that actually what you do is you deal with the contracts in front of you, you develop the relationships, and you make sure that we have a whole government approach to trade. This is one of the big differences with a new coalition government. It won't be one person dealing with trade, it's the whole government. And that's why David Cameron will be bringing leading business and political figures to mainland China, to Hong Kong area, to make sure that actually we have a proper approach, if you like, a whole government approach to dealing with trade.
Let me ask you a very candid question.
Sure.
What worries you when you get on the plane and you have a chance to sort of just breathe from the day-to-day activity? I mean, there's obviously things in the economy that you worry about and you think that needs to be addressed. Can you give me the top one or two things that you think needs to be addressed immediately?
Well, I think we need to, from a UK point of view, just reiterate the point that we are going to deal with the deficit so that investors can see that. I think that message is getting through, so that's perhaps a diminishing problem. I think the bigger issue is making sure that businesses have the confidence to plan and develop, and that's about us in government being more effective. It's why we're cutting the corporation tax in the UK, so it's a good place to do profitable business. It's also why I'm engaged with my colleagues in spreading the word across Asia. This is a vital part for UK business, and we see a great two-way street.
All right, excellent discussion. Thank you so much for joining us here in Hong Kong. Enjoy the rest of your trip.